Elliot Webb in the morning. Real life in Herefordshire and Worcestershire.
BBC Hereford and Worcester.
Good morning and welcome to our special European election debate on BBC Hereford and Worcester. For the next hour, we're going to be talking about all things European. And for that reason, we're transforming the studio here in Worcester into our very own European-style cafe.
BBC Hereford and Worcester. Big European debate.
So you hear a lot about European cafe culture, so we're having some of it this morning, it seems only right. Joining me around the table is a panel of candidates who'll be looking for your vote when the polls open later on this week. They are Anthea McIntyre from the Conservatives, Nina Gill from Labour, Neville Farmer from the Liberal Democrats, Jim Carver from UKIP, Will Duckworth from the Greens, Nikki Sinclaire from We Demand a Referendum Now, and Mike Nattrass from An Independence from Europe. We'll also be hearing from some of the other parties during the course of the debate. So hopefully you're all sitting comfortably. Everyone okay for drinks and yeah, everything? Croissant?
Another glass of wine.
Another glass of wine. Blimey. So we're going to have a little look at what's coming up, looking at the menu. By digesting some of the key issues around the election, talking about immigration, of course, jobs, we're going to be asking about that, and I suppose the ultimate question, if we're going to have any kind of meaningful debate about the EU, the question of whether we should even be in or should we come out when it comes to the EU. So we'll be hearing from our continental panel of people from around the European Union who now live in Herefordshire and Worcestershire. And, of course, we want your input as well. We want to hear from you. So text the word HW, the letters HW, and then your message to 81333. And there's a Twitter hashtag as well if you want to get involved. It's EuroBBC. If you want to do it that way, we're at BBCHW. Use the hashtag EuroBBC. So let's start with one of the biggest issues that this election is being fought on, certainly one that grabs most of the headlines, and that is, of course, the topic of immigration. In a moment, we'll hear what the candidates think, but first, our reporter Matthew Bone has a few key facts to get you started.
Immigration controls were lifted on the newest countries to join the EU in January. The first figures show that a total of 140,000 Romanians and Bulgarians were working here in the UK during the first 3 months of this year. That's actually 4,000 fewer than at the end of last year when visas were still required, but the numbers are up compared to January 2013. These two countries aside, the most recent Office for National Statistics stats show that almost half of all immigration to the UK was from non-EU countries in the year ending September 2013. 39% of immigration was from the EU and 15% was accounted for by returning British citizens. That's a total of 212,000 long-term migrants to the UK that year, a statistically significant increase from 154,000 in the previous year.
So, Matthew Bone, our political reporter, with some of the stats there to give you a heads up on how it stands currently. So, is immigration from the EU a good thing for Herefordshire and Worcestershire? Let's bring some of our guests in on this. Nina Gill from Labour.
Well, I certainly have visited quite a lot of farms in Herefordshire, and they all said, look, you know, without migrants from Central and Eastern Europe, we will not be able to pick our fruit. Now, the issue for us is a skills gap. We need to address the skills. One of the reasons why migrants are attracted to come here is because we can't provide all our health services and social services, etc., because we haven't got people with the skills. So I think, you know, people are attracted to be here for those reasons, because we have jobs available.
So we're very much relying on them. Anthea McIntyre from the Conservatives, what do you think of that?
Well, I think I'm all in favour of having free movement of people across Europe in order to work. And what I don't like to see is free movement to claim benefit. So we've clamped down on, you can't claim job seekers allowance for the first 3 months you're here. And I think that's perfectly fair. And if you still don't have a job after 6, again, it stops. So I think we're starting to stop the exploitation, if you like, of the benefit system. But it's absolutely right that we need workers to come and do things like pick our fruit. Where I live in Herefordshire, we rely very heavily on Eastern Europeans to come and pick our fruit and veg. Work is fine. It's travelling to claim benefits that I object to.
So Jim Carver from UKIP, we need the immigrant workers.
Well, we've got a long history. I mean, like Anthea, I myself live in rural Herefordshire, and we've got a long history of people coming to pick fruit, and it was controlled before under the Seasonal Adjusted Workers Scheme, SAWS, which is now ceased, and that is a big issue because speaking to farmers that I've been campaigning during the course of this election campaign, it's quite clear that the farmers are worried because they've got a situation now where traditionally Bulgarian and Romanian workers would come over to pick the fruits. They're worried increasingly that in a couple of years it won't be beneficial for them to come over and pick fruit. And let's be clear about this, Anthea. You're only talking about a 12-week wait before claiming benefits. That's a ridiculous situation. UKIP isn't opposed in any way, shape or form to immigration. We take the Australian model and say we have to sort of welcome in. And Nina talks about the skills base. Well, quite frankly, the answer to when I learnt my trade was working my way up on the factory floor. What we've got to do is give our youngsters a chance, and with youth unemployment at around about 20%, the ability to sort of get an unskilled job is mitigated severely by this open door EU policy.
OK, Jim, let's hear from Neville Farmer from the Lib Dems.
Yeah, it's interesting. The immigration debate often misses out the fact that the majority of immigrants come here because they want to work, and they work really hard, and they contribute to our tax revenue dramatically. So that shouldn't be forgotten for a start. We're also an ageing population, and we need young people to come here and help with all manner of things. But I do agree that we also need to improve our skills base, and that's why, for instance, Phil Bennion MEP has been working so hard on pushing for money for apprenticeships, particularly in the West Midlands, and that's been a key part of our policy for the last few years. OK, thank you very much.
We'll bring in some of the other parties around the table in a moment. First of all, though, we've been putting a continental panel together here in Herefordshire and Worcestershire. It's made up of people who've moved here from other parts of the EU. Let's see what they made of the issue of immigration.
Hello, my name's Theo Ellinas. I'm from Redditch, from the Quality Award holder Wynyard Chippy. My father is Cypriot. He's been in England since we're talking about the 60s, the Beatle area. I think there should be some type of restrictions. People who are skilled, there's many skilled people come from abroad, and the majority of them, great, they can contribute to the local communities, but obviously you get the other type, whereas I think there should be a type of restrictions and more border checks, more border controls.
Hello, I'm Dominic from the Bellman's Cross. I'm 45 years old and I live in Kidderminster. I've been in Worcestershire for 20 years now. In England, they're pretty flexible the way they see Europe, really. I mean, I know there's a few issues with people coming. The gate is open to a lot of people with no work permit, and that's, is an issue. Mm-hmm. But I don't see a lot of bad points, really.
My name is Veronica Bayliss. I've been in Worcester since 1980. I'm from Holland originally. There are a lot of jobs here which the English people don't want to do, so they're bringing in not necessarily Eastern European, but people from European countries who can come over and work.
Hi, I'm Milko. I've been in Worcester for 6 years. I come from Bulgaria. In my case, it has worked really well because I'm somebody who has come from Bulgaria, finished his education here, now working in full-time employment, meanwhile completed my postgraduate studies. I'm a very good example of a successful European project and a good example how it could be implemented in the UK. However, from a point of view which is being portrayed in the media, that people come from their country, abuse the system, try to cheat the system. Yes, there may be a small percentage of people who are doing it, but I think the vast majority of people who come here.
So the final voice there, one of the Bulgarian workers who's currently over here working, and Nikki Sinclaire from We Demand a Referendum Now. You were listening to that. He's over here. He says it works very well, and English people won't do some of the jobs that they're doing.
Yeah, and look, I don't blame anyone. I've lived abroad myself. I lived in Cyprus before it joined the European Union, and I would urge everyone to go and work abroad if they have the opportunity. I blame the politicians here. It's the politicians of the main parties that have allowed this situation to develop. And I do think that people have a problem with uncontrolled immigration. They certainly have a problem being told that they're racist if they raise the issue. And what I'm getting on the streets is people are very annoyed about that. It is not racist to actually say, hang on a second, we need to control our borders. Who's in the country? We cannot stop, for example, rapists or murderers coming because we've got no records on them. They're not on the sex offenders register. There are serious issues about that.
So, Nikki, what do we do then? How do we control that?
We need immigration into this country. We have a low birth rate, so we do need immigration, but we need to have a point system for everyone outside the United Kingdom, and we literally control our borders. And there's nothing wrong in that. Other developed countries across the world do exactly that, and I don't blame any of these people for coming here, because if I was Romanian or Polish, I would want to come here. It is the politicians who have basically sold the people of this country down the river by saying, and then when they say that these English people do not want to do the jobs, well, that's a failure of the main parties that have not got them into work.
You're blaming the main parties. Let's bring them in to answer that. Anthea McIntyre from the Conservatives.
Well, I think you have to recognise, Nikki, that immigration from non-EU countries has been cut by a third. It's at its lowest level since 1998. So it shows that we are moving in the right direction and cutting immigration. And that is why we want to have better control of our borders. And as far as I'm concerned, that is part of the EU reform. No one's saying the EU is perfect. And so we need to have reforms and renegotiate to make sure we do have full control of our borders.
You have to have unanimity. All 28 countries agree into that reform, and only one country has to say no, and that reform will fall.
Okay, Nikki.
But look what we've achieved so far, Nikki. We've demonstrated that we can.
Freedom of movement is a central tenet of the European Union. It would need a treaty change.
Hang on, hold on. We need to bring in. There's so many people. We need to bring in everybody. You'll all get a chance to talk. Let's hear from, because we've not heard from Mike Nattrass either. He's from the Party in Independence from Europe. Mike, let's get your take on this.
There is no control. Obviously, if you have open borders, a government can't claim that it's controlled anything if it's got open borders from Europe. You do from Europe. People come here and work if they want to. That's open borders.
So do our people.
Yeah, of course. Let me just finish what I'm going to say there, because this country is already overcrowded. Of course, people come here because they speak wonderful English. We don't go and work in Bulgaria because we speak wonderful Bulgarian.
But we do go and live in Spain. We live in Spain, don't we?
We are a magnet for people to come here from Europe through open borders. Now, we've already got a housing crisis. We've already got schools, hospitals, even roads and infrastructure, social security. All of these things are under pressure, and we have open borders. So it means we cannot budget for next year. What we need is work permits. If people have work permits and we know they're coming into the country, you talk about apple pickers. All they need to do is say, hey, we can't find any local labour. The job centre will say, OK, you need some help there. Here's some work permits. Bring some people in. But after 3 months, or whatever the period is, they go home. They don't stay here to collect social security. They don't have to use the facilities. The bottom line is government should manage the country. Government should manage the country, and they are not.
Okay, hold on, Nikki. We'll come back to you in a minute. Let's hear from Nina Gill from the Labour Party.
I think, number one, we do control our borders. We opted out of Schengen, and that means that we do see who comes in and who goes out, and people do. And it is quite difficult to get into Britain. But in the European context, we have, we do have freedom of movement, but as many Brits live over there and work in other countries, they do. The figures are the same. 2 million live out there as they are here. Now, the problem with immigration that we have to address is the one of making sure that they're not exploited, that they're not undercutting our wages, that they're not, denying our social rights. So there are issues that we have to address. I would, but...
Okay, Nina, the one person who sat very patiently and hasn't had a say yet, from the Green Party, let's hear from Will Duckworth.
Well, just to correct Nina, just very slightly, the figures show 2.2 million out and 2.3 million in. So rounding them both off to 2 is pretty close. The truth is we have an awful lot of people going over, working in Germany, going over, living in Spain and all sorts of other places. And the absolute truth is immigration is massively useful to us and to our economy. People don't come over here to claim benefits. The vast majority of people coming here from EU countries and non-EU countries contribute greatly to our society and to our economy. We need to stop just tolerating and ignoring people who come in. We need to actually accept and respect them and appreciate their contributions to our society in all ways.
So, Jim Carver from UKIP, if we stopped immigration, European immigration, we wouldn't be able to. It wouldn't work the other way. We couldn't go the other way, could we? We couldn't go to Spain to live, for example.
Well, of course we could, because it's in other countries' interests. You know, that actually
it's in our interest to have immigrants.
You know, no, look, and let me correct you, Elliot. We're not talking about stopping immigration. We're talking about controlling immigration. You know, and this isn't about locking the doors and putting the borders. It's about saying we decide who comes to this country, as any.
But
moderates
coming into the border. If you get on a train from Brussels to here, you go through 2 checks in order to get here. So why is that not a control?
Because
you have to show your passport?
It's not, Nina. I can tell you, it's not a control because of EU immigration and the borders are open. I'm not suggesting all are going to come, but it is a clear fact that 485 million have a right of access to any of the 28 member states in the European Union. And the situation is...
Okay, one at a time.
The situation is only going to get worse.
Nikki, let
the
Jim
situation is only going to get. I'll just pass over to you a minute. The situation is only going to get worse. You know, we had on the 3rd of October 2012, a Labour, Liberal Democrat, and every Conservative MEP voted in principle for the principle of European Union enlargement.
Jim, this sounds like is this scaremongering a little bit? You keep saying like 480 million people can come, but they won't, will they?
Not at all. Not at all. Jim, no, look, as a grandson of an immigrant, I think we have a duty. If you look at opinion polls, 77% of British people are not content with this open door immigration policy. And what I find most interesting is that 60% of our own ethnic minorities, and that includes first and second generation migrants, share that concern and want of control on our borders.
Can I come back and say what Nina said?
Nothing to do with the truth about it. And if they actually thought about it for a second, one of the main reasons for the European project is to make all of the countries in it successful enough that in the end, if you're born in Poland, you stay there because that's where you want to be. You're Polish.
Okay, listen. We have to move on because it's. Hang on. So Nikki, we need to move on because it's 22 minutes past 11. We've got a lot to get through. We've got so many voices to try and hear as well. We have more questions to discuss than just this.
Factually incorrect. It needs to be addressed.
Well,
she said there was exit controls. The Labour Party abolished the.
Okay, Nikki.
I wonder why this point. No one wants to hear this point.
Okay.
I wonder why everyone shouts over this point because it's an important point.
Very quickly,
the Labour Party abolished exit controls from this country, and the Conservative Party haven't. So when Nina says we know who leaves the country, that is untrue. There is no exit controls in this country.
Okay, Nikki, Nina, reply quickly.
What I said was that actually we control people coming in. That there are controls, and yes, they did get rid of those exit. You know, one of the things Labour has said is yes, we acknowledge.
Nina, you're moving
that
on to another point.
Enlargement,
no, I'm going to start.
More people.
Listen, okay, I'm going to blow a whistle in a minute. I'll throw a croissant at someone. They're arguing amongst themselves now. We're going to take a second to bring in Dave Nellist from the No to EU party. He's also standing in this year's European elections. Here's his take on the immigration debate.
I came down here from Yorkshire for work and I stayed here from 43 years ago and brought up my family. I think everybody has the right to do that, but the way in which it's been managed by the European Union is not to develop the economies and to develop the structures and the jobs and the unity of countries, but to use the migration of labour as a way of driving down to in a race to the bottom, the trade union levels of wages and conditions which have been established in countries like Britain. So our opposition is not to Bulgarians, our opposition is to the old Etonians who are running this system.
There we go. That was Dave Nellist from the No to EU party. Also, Michael Coleman is standing here for the BNP this May. Here's his party's take on the immigration debate.
Under European Union directives, essentially we were required to open our borders to all comers. And since then we've seen millions, literally millions of people come from Eastern Europe, the far east of Europe, and through the soft underbelly of Europe we see people coming in from North Africa and the Far East. And that is not acceptable to the British National Party, and it's one of the many reasons, one of the key reasons we wish to withdraw from the European Union.
So that's Michael Coleman there for the BNP. You're listening to a special European election debate live on BBC Hereford and Worcester. I'm Elliot Webb, and I'm joined in our metaphorical EU cafe by many of the people who are after your votes on Thursday. Anthea McIntyre from the Conservatives, Nina Gill from Labour, Neville Farmer from the Liberal Democrats, Jim Carver's also with us from UKIP, Will Duckworth from the Greens, Nikki Sinclaire from We Demand a Referendum Now, and also joined by Mike Nattrass from An Independence from Europe. If you'd like to get involved with the debate, we'd love to hear from you. Your thoughts on this, please, this morning. Text the word HW with the letters HW and then your message to 81333. On Twitter as well, you can get involved on Twitter. We're at BBCHW and use the hashtag EuroBBC, and we'll have some of your thoughts before midday. It's BBC Hereford and Worcester. It's 11:25.
BBC Hereford and Worcester. Big European debate.
Okay, so we're in our virtual EU cafe. Let's move on to our next course. And it's all about businesses and jobs. And does being in or out of Europe mean much for the economy? What does it mean? What sort of problems does it pose, opportunities does it pose for our employers, our economy and our workforce? Our reporter, Lucy King, has some stats to kick us off.
According to the Treasury, the UK's net contribution to the EU budget in 2012-13 was almost £10 billion. That's £9.679 billion to be exact. To put that into some context, by comparison here in the UK, the government spent £6.8 billion on railways, £36.4 billion on defence and more than £100 billion on pensions last year. So for the £10 billion that the UK puts into the European pot, we have access to the world's biggest single market of 500 million people. The Department for Business, Innovation and Skills point out that the European Union remains the UK's most important export market. Half of our trade goes to the single market, estimated to be worth more than £400 billion a year. It also says that around 3.5 million UK jobs are actually linked to UK exports to other EU member states.
There's our reporter Lucy King with the stats on the economy and our workforce. So, would it damage our economy if we came out of Europe? Let's start with a man who wants to take us out of Europe, Jim Carver from UKIP. It would be a disaster, wouldn't it, Jim?
Not at all. It would give us the opportunity to actually, the first thing we'll be able to do outside the European Union is regain our seat on the World Trade Organisation. So whenever there's a next round of World Trade Organisation talks and negotiations, it will actually be a British Trade Minister who will be negotiating and not an EU Trade Commissioner who's currently a Belgian gentleman called Karel de Gucht. So we need a situation where we can actually have far more influence outside of the European Union. And, you know, I'm a small businessman myself. It's only 5% of our small and medium enterprises export to the European Union, and yet 100% of our SMEs are bound by this burden of EU regulation. Outside the European Union, we're in a situation where we can deregulate, we can become far more competitive on a global scale. I really believe that inside the European Union, our future is a clam, outside the world is our oyster.
Good analogy, that. So is that the case, Anthea McIntyre, that this is, in fact, being part of Europe is bad for Britain's business?
We benefit hugely from the single market, 500 million consumers. We are a great exporting country. If you look at some of the major manufacturing that we have in the West Midland region, Jaguar Land Rover is a classic. We're continually seeing investment. A company like Tata Motors is just building its world headquarters near Coventry. Those businesses come in partly because of our access to that single market. But all of our SMEs need more encouragement. I'm very keen that we cut the red tape that affects them, and that is why, as a West Midland MEP, I've actually got a resolution through the Parliament that goes to the Commission to tell them just that we need to reduce red tape, that we need to improve the skills base, that we need to encourage entrepreneurial activity from a young age through university and beyond.
So what does the EU give us then? Why is that bringing in more trade and more business then? What's the point of it?
In that case, it's open access to the market with no trade barriers, no tariff barriers. There is still a way to go in completion of the services single market, because there are still barriers and sometimes non-tariff barriers that are put in our way. But there is a huge benefit to having those trading partners and the ability for our companies to grow. So we're producing more cars than ever before. Manufacturing is hugely on the increase. We're seeing jobs coming back to this country that were offshored a number of months and years ago.
So there's definitely a bit of a recovery going on if you believe the stats, and there are jobs, as you said. Mike Nattrass, why would you want to take us out of Europe then?
Well, first of all, 80% of everything we do, 80% of our GDP is to do with what we do in our own country. 20% is our exports, and roughly half of that is to Europe. However, the statistics are skewed because we put in statistics of stuff we send through Rotterdam and say it's an export to Europe. So there's that has to be unscrambled. We've just been talking about cars. 55% of our exports of cars are to outside the EU. And actually, as Germany is our main competitor there on cars, it is a very tough market to get to. If we were de-restricted, if we were allowed to take off all of the regulations, the one-size-fits-all Brussels regulations, it would free up our small enterprises. And I can tell you, I get so many complaints from these people about unnecessary regulations. I can't imagine what planet some of these politicians are on.
Nina Gill from the Labour Party, coming out of Europe then, free us up from all the red tape.
Well, I'd say two things. One is that it's extremely risky and reckless thing to do because, you know, this idea that we could suddenly go and negotiate our own trade agreements where, you know, other countries are not willing to come out and start negotiating with Britain on their own because they prefer to deal with the EU. And wait, you know, and this idea, Mike, you have been there. I don't know, you've been an MEP for a number of years. What have you done to reduce any of that legislation to SMEs? Why have you not voted in any of the regulations or any of the laws that would have reduced the red tape? That's what
the answer
MEPs
is
do.
we have
That is
voted
what the
against.
MEPs
One at a
do.
time, one at a
You know,
time.
The answer is we have voted against
I'm sorry.
Nina,
When I was
let
an
Mike
MEP,
answer. Let Mike answer,
Very
please.
specifically, we have voted against the new regulations wholesale. All regulations should come from Westminster, not from Brussels.
But Westminster's involved in that regulation when it's.
So you vote against regulations, even if they're good regulations. That will
and you
benefit
vote
28
against things
countries.
that would bring
Simply
investment
because
to our region
you're
and money to our region. And you asked earlier about what do we benefit? We benefit £3,600 per household per year because we're in the EU. That is a direct benefit. But we benefit in funding for our universities, for our science parks, for
Nina,
agriculture as well.
I have Nikki Sinclaire huffing by the side of me in disagreement from We Demand a Referendum. Now, Nikki, what's your thought?
Well, yes, but actually, I just want to clear that my party's point on what I'm standing on is actually a referendum, because I think we need to have this national debate, not just in a European election time, but actually we need to debate this, because this is an essential part of, you know, we've been told all these scare tactics. And I just want to cast your listeners' minds back to the late 90s when we were told that if we didn't join the single currency, it would be disaster for this country. We would lose jobs. We would lose investment. The Labour Party was saying it. Huge parts of the Conservative Party. The CBI was saying it. The head of Nissan said it. And now here we are, the CBI and the Labour Party and the head of Nissan is saying if we leave the EU, it will be a disaster for jobs. Why have they tried to scare the British people? The facts are absolutely rubbish. We're second largest net contributors. You just need to look. I'll give you examples. People can look on BBC on Google and look at the reports from 1999 and 2000 on that. They're still on the BBC. You just need to look at any car park. Wherever your listeners are, just look out to the car park and look at the German cars, look at the French cars, look at the Italian cars. Come on, if we're going to leave the European Union, and I think we should have a debate about it, where, why would they be cutting off their nose to spite their face? And I actually have, hang on, I haven't finished. I have, and Anthea will tell us, I've been on the employment committee with Anthea, and we have over and over again tried to defeat the red tape, come in here, which kills British jobs, and we look over. Sometimes we win the vote by one, sometimes we lose a vote by one, and we both look over, and UKIP aren't there.
Nikki,
that's annoying.
Okay, let's bring in, because we need to hear from the Lib Dems on this. Nikki made the point, we were told it was going to be a disaster if we didn't join the euro. That never happened, so it's scaremongering, isn't it?
No, it's not scaremongering at all. What happened subsequently with the euros probably scared all of us far more. But actually, the truth of it is, even now, of the 600 and odd companies that have set up their European bases in the UK, because it's a gateway to Europe, many of them are writing saying, please, for heaven's sake, do not cut your nose off to spite your face. It's much easier to negotiate at the negotiating table than to walk out of the room and say, I'm not going to negotiate anymore.
Well, hang on.
If I could just add one other point.
Yeah, very quickly.
Regarding the World Trade Organization comment, it doesn't necessarily follow that a country like Britain will actually get a seat at the top table. The chances are that we will end up becoming a non-aligned country and have to sit behind India.
Okay. Calm down, everybody. One at a time. Jim, I'm going to let you talk because Nikki questioned your voting record at UKIP at the Parliament.
I think what Neville, the Liberal Democrats' approach just now just sums up how little faith the other three mainstream political parties have in our country anymore. This is about renegotiating, and the only way we can renegotiate is by pulling out the European Union. You cannot renegotiate. I'm sorry. I'm making a point. I'm making a point that our future is outside the European Union, and you cannot renegotiate. You cannot renegotiate. If you listen to what Angela Merkel is saying, if you listen to what President Barroso, the President of the Commission, is saying, if you listen to what Vice President Redding is saying, they are all saying renegotiation is not an option. So
that's not right.
Hang on. Okay, listen. One at a time. We also want to hear what people are thinking at home to this. You're listening to a whole raft of different opinions. We'd like to get your opinions on this as well, please. 81333. Put HW at the beginning of your text. On Twitter, you can follow us. It's at BBC HW. Use the hashtag EuroBBC. Now, as well as the candidates we've got here in the studio with us, also got the option of voting for other parties in the European elections. Let's hear a bit about one of those. This is Derek Hilling, standing for the English Democrats.
Not only is England a member of the European Union, but England is also a member of the United Kingdom. The English Democrats were formed in 2002 because we believe that England is getting a raw deal from devolution. And our policy now is that we want an independent England. We want England to be independent not only of Europe, but of all the nations within the United Kingdom. So we're going into this election offering the people of England an opportunity to say no to Europe, but also no to the UK.
BBC Hereford and Worcester. Big European debate.
That was Derek Hilling you're hearing there, standing for the English Democrats. You're listening to a special European election debate live on BBC Hereford and Worcester. I'm Elliot Webb, joined in our metaphorical EU cafe that I think has moved to Greece now. I think we'll have a bit of souvlaki in a minute. We've got Anthea McIntyre from the Conservatives, Nina Gill from Labour, also Neville Farmer from the Lib Dems, Jim Carver from UKIP, Nikki Sinclaire from We Demand a Referendum Now, Mike Nattrass from An Independence for Europe, and also Will Duckworth from the Greens. Will, I've very remiss of me to ask for your opinion on the Greens' opinion on what it would do for our economy if we came out of Europe.
Well, first of all, I'd like to apologise on behalf of all of the rest of the candidates for the way you've been interrupted and we've been interrupting each other. And
thank you, Will.
And have ruined the debate at parts. But I think that I actually agree with Nikki that we actually should have a referendum. Not now, but we should have a referendum so that we can discuss the issues properly, because this election has got nothing to do with whether we go in or out. The European Union can't decide if that's a matter for our own government, and rightly so. But We need to be in it, I believe. We need to be in it for the sake of business, for the sake of jobs. And it's very interesting, so many people talking about deregulation, because, of course, one person's deregulation is another person's job security, workers' rights, animal welfare, and protection for the environment. Those are things we have to look out for, and those are things that have to be done pan-European at least. We can't do them on our own.
You mentioned there that these elections actually are essentially for the running of Europe, aren't they, rather than in or out? We'll come to that particular thorny issue in just a minute. Let me remind you, you can get involved yourselves. We'd love your thoughts on this if you're listening to this and particularly agreeing with somebody or very much disagreeing with one of the voices you're hearing. We'd love your thoughts on this, please. Text the word HW along with your message to 81333 and use the Twitter hashtag EuroBBC. Right, I suppose one of the key questions we'll come to in a minute, the in-out debate. First of all, the UK won't be the only country voting this week. Across the continent, people will be heading off to the polls. Our political reporter has been to Barcelona to see how the election is shaping up over there.
It's a beautiful sunny afternoon here in the centre of Barcelona. There are plenty of people milling around here, so it's the perfect opportunity, really, to stop a few and find out what they make of the European Union.
My name is Laura. I'm here from Barcelona. To be in the European Union, well, the positive is that it's like a recognized country because it's inside in an important group. But on the other hand, I think we have become poorest than before. For example, the change of the current from pesetas to euros, all the products has increased their price, but not the salary.
What do you think about the UK's attitude towards Europe?
They are very intelligent and they're like, we should follow them, like thinking like them, because they are thinking about them, not trying to be in a big group just to be there.
You're from Barcelona.
The European Union, good or bad?
At Europa?
Unión Europea.
Very good.
Okay.
Very good. Segur que és de la BBC. Because Catalunya is important, sus derechos, com es diu? No.
Rights.
For your rights, is very important.
Okay.
Because without Europa, Catalunya, finish for the government.
Okay, thank you very much.
My name is Manel. I'm from Barcelona. The next year I don't vote.
Okay.
But no sé, the political is corruption, and for future in Barcelona I don't like these ideas.
Oriol, I'm from here from Barcelona. It's good for the economical perspective, but I think that here in Barcelona, at least in Catalonia, what we want is to vote our future, and I think that Europe is a good place to start.
Yeah. Is that for independence?
Yeah.
So there we are, Matthew Bone, our political reporter, out and about in Barcelona, getting a range of opinions there. So it's, of course, not just us casting our vote this week. So the big question, I suppose, this is the one it all hinges on, and I guess the next 20 minutes might become quite heated. The big question, should we be in or out of Europe? Anthea McIntyre from the Conservatives. In or out? Where does your party stand?
My party stands for reform, renegotiation, and then an in-out referendum to let the people decide. So we're going to have a renegotiation. We want to see, for example, the budget continue to be cut. David Cameron got a substantial budget cut. That budget was not supported by any of the parties. UKIP didn't support the budget when we got a cut. Neither, of course, did the Labour Party. So we want to see a cut in the budget. We want to see powers coming back to member states, back to the UK to decide. We want to have the ability for the parliaments to have the red card that says no to legislation that they don't want to see.
But it still sounds like you're staying in. You still want to stay in.
It all depends. We will obviously go to negotiate a deal that we think is a good one. But the decision,
and if you don't get it?
The decision is going to be made by the British people, not by the politicians. It's going to be an in-out referendum, and it's only the Conservatives that will do that. Lib Dems and Labour won't have a referendum, and UKIP just can't deliver. they're never going to have enough members in the House of Commons to deliver a referendum.
And Anthea,
so only the Conservatives.
if we had this referendum tomorrow, how would you vote?
Fortunately, we're not going to have a referendum.
But if we did?
But the reason we're not is because what is in front of us at the moment is nothing that we can vote for. We need to see what reform and what renegotiation we can do. Once we've got... If we didn't have reform, obviously, it wouldn't be a good deal, because I think we should have...
But Anthea, I'll ask you again, because maybe you didn't understand it. If we had a vote tomorrow,
yes,
how would you vote?
We won't have a vote tomorrow.
No, but if we did, we're not in a cafe, but we're pretending we are. So let's pretend we've got a referendum tomorrow. How would you vote?
We're not having a referendum tomorrow, and I wouldn't. I'm glad we haven't, because at the moment, the point is, if I don't like the Europe that we've got at the moment, it doesn't mean to say that I want to just give it all up without trying to make it work for Britain.
Okay, let's bring in some other. Thank you, Anthea. Let's bring in some other voices. Nina Gill, the same question to you. We have a referendum tomorrow. How would Nina Gill from the Labour Party vote?
Well, I would actually vote to stay in. I think, I'm all for having a debate, but the debate should be about the kind of Europe we want. Europe does need to change. It's not perfect as it is, but I think what I find really interesting is we're having a debate about the European parliamentary election, about in and out, where the European Parliament or the MEPs have no say in whether Britain stays in or not. It is the government here that makes that decision. So it's kind of a bit of a red herring, really. And I'd just like to add, when we're talking about having a referendum, and we heard earlier from one of your colleagues that, it costs us 10 billion. I mean, there are many other items of expenditure that are as expensive or more. Why don't we have referendum on those issues? Why don't we have a referendum on our membership of NATO? Why don't we have a referendum on our membership of the UN?
Nina, thanks.
It makes no sense. If you want to change something, I've always believed you have to engage and change it from within.
Okay.
That is the only way you can influence and get a good deal for West Midlands.
Jim Carver from UKIP. Nina makes a good point there, in as much as the fact that this isn't anything to do with voting to go in or out. This is voting MEPs into the European Parliament. So you're taking everyone out of Europe. This is irrelevant. This is a red herring to what we're voting for on Thursday, isn't it, Jim?
No, it's not at all. It's about keeping the political momentum and the pressure on the Lib Lab con, because we have a situation now. Nina spoke of, what about the 10 billion it costs? Well, it's too high a price to pay, quite frankly, Nina. 75% of... Sorry,
let him on, Nina, let him answer.
Did I interrupt you? 75% of the laws that now govern the productive sector of our country emanate in the form of a directive or regulation from Brussels. That is not correct.
So
that is not right.
Jim.
It is true. It is true.
What laws from the Liberal Democrats this year didn't you like, then, Jim?
Actually, to answer the point of the Liberal Democrats say that's not true, if you look at the advice given by the German federal courts to the Bundestag, because they asked the same question, said how much EU regulation affects Germany, it actually came in at around about 83%. So perhaps Neville, I'm being generous.
Okay, Jim. Hang on, Neville. Before you answer, because I don't know if you heard the question. Sorry, can I just get this question into Jim, because it's important. So, what laws have been passed this year from the European Parliament that UKIP hasn't liked?
Well, there are many, and the trouble, and all the MEPs of all political parties will acknowledge that a lot of the legislation.
A specific one, because we're talking very vaguely, and people. Lots of people don't understand what goes on in Europe. So give us a specific.
I can give you one example: the financial transaction tax we've seen, which has been introduced as a taxation on financial transactions across the European Union.
So that's taxing bankers. People would probably like that, wouldn't they?
But hang on. But Britain isn't even a member of the Eurozone, and we've just lost the case in the European Court of Justice that says we are bound to. And it just shows the control that the European Union has over us. Now we have to. It's an old-fashioned word. I believe in an old-fashioned word called sovereignty. And to my mind, the great strength of British democracy is its accountability. If we don't like what our politicians do, we don't vote for them at a general election. We did that to John Major's government. We did that to Gordon Brown's government. But we cannot renegotiate the European Union to suit our liking.
Let's bring Neville in, because Neville was trying to speak earlier on from the Lib Dems. Neville Farmer.
Yeah, I would just say I think the financial transactions tax is not something to be particularly upset about, frankly. We need Europe's banks to...
Jim, let him speak.
What were you saying about not interrupting people? And the banking industry is a huge industry for us, but across Europe as well. And if we distance ourselves from Europe, our banking industry will suffer in the long run, and it's bound to do so. But I go back to the point that was made earlier. This election this week, nobody who is elected will have any say over a referendum whatsoever. What people are voting on is how well they will perform for the next 5 years representing the people of the West Midlands. And if all people vote on is whether or not there are people who say, let's get out, and then, like certain parties, don't even turn up for meetings, don't vote in meetings, and have one of the worst attendance records in the EU, despite taking the money, then something is seriously wrong with the voting system.
So, Nikki, Sinclaire, so it's a waste of time voting for you, then, for we demand a referendum now? Is that right?
It's certainly not a waste, because I've got of an independent source, the highest stats for actual work within the European Parliament. I've been involved in more activities than any other of my colleagues, so actually I've proven to be the hardest working. And I'm the only MEP in the whole country that has a mobile surgery. It hasn't just appeared at election times. I've actually been there for 4.5 years, every town. And today, even after this debate, people can come and speak to my team in Hereford Town Centre, and I will be in Worcester for the next few hours after this debate, so people can actually speak. But they haven't just not election time, they've been throughout there. What we need with the European debate, and it's quite right, whatever the result of this election, it's not going to mean we're going to be in the EU or leave the EU. We need to have a sensible debate. Now, David Cameron's position of having a referendum after reform, well, if you listen to the Liberal Democrats, the most pro-European debate about the EU is that we need it for jobs and investment. If that is true, and I totally do not agree with that, but if you accept that is true, therefore, you're going to have 3 years of uncertainty, which is the biggest enemy of investment. So that's why my position is quite clear. We need to have a national debate on this and have a referendum. And we're actually the only party, because I would still have a referendum to stay in the EU as well as have one to leave the EU. UKIP won't go down that far, so there's a difference between me and UKIP. But by electing me, I'm also a safe option for those Conservative voters who want to send a message to David Cameron, but don't like UKIP, who are threatening the Conservative at the next election. By voting for me, they will actually have a safe protest.
OK, let's let Anthea answer that. Anthea McIntyre from the Conservatives. 3 years of uncertainty. It's what Nikki's saying. Would it not be easier to just get it sorted and have a referendum?
No, because we need to see reforms. And I don't think it's worth... Nina is saying we should just stay in regardless. I don't think that's a very good negotiating position. But you did say you'd stay in.
No,
whatever.
I said my position is that
so
I would stay
think in order to reform... David Cameron is saying that we need to reform and we need to renegotiate, and that's what we will do. And the public and business is actually very aware of that. And yet, to answer Nikki's point, we've got the highest amount of inward investment of any country into the UK, despite what she calls uncertainty. We see more jobs being created. We see the lowest levels of unemployment for a very long time. We see the economy improving. And the fact that there is the likelihood of a referendum in the offing is not stopping that.
OK, thank you, Anthea. We'll bring in some of the other parties around the table in just a second. You'll have a chance to have your say. First of all, our reporter Kalpana Badu has been speaking to people here in Herefordshire and Worcestershire to see where they stand on that big in-out question.
Out. Because they've ruined our agriculture, they've ruined all sorts of things.
How confident are you that the UK would be OK if we decided to be on our own?
We were all right before. We don't have to trade with them, because there aren't any rules that say we can't trade with the euro.
I think we've got to be in for our future. I don't particularly like it, but I think if we come out, we could be in real trouble.
What kind of trouble do you think we could be in?
I don't think we can cope on our own. We think we can as a country, but I honestly don't think we can, because we're not that big now.
We should have never been in it in the first place.
Why do you say that?
As far as I can see, that we pay more in than a lot of countries, don't we?
So do you think the UK would be better off on its own?
I think so, but I could be wrong.
I'm unsure at the moment. One thing says, yeah, stay in the EU, but another thing says we might be better off out of it, because we've got too many powers and everything taken away from us, and people in Brussels saying what we should and shouldn't do in our own country.
How do you think the UK could cope then if they decided to go alone?
We survived before, so we could do it again. I think it's just a question of having faith in ourselves. we could manage before, and Europe needs us, we don't need Europe.
We should be with Europe. Why do you say that?
Because I don't think we can get out now.
Do you think we'd be all right on our own if we did decide to?
No, I don't think America would have anything to do with this if we didn't have Europe with us.
I don't think we get many benefits at all. I think, as an island, I think we're still quite set apart anyway. I mean, we're not in the Euro or anything like that.
BBC Hereford and Worcester. Big European debate.
So, some of your thoughts there. This is a special European election debate live on BBC Hereford and Worcester. We'll have some more opinion on the big in or out question. First of all, you've been talking about this quite a lot on social media, on Twitter and on text. Stuart Kingscott has been having a look at some of the texts coming in. Stuart, what are people saying?
We'll start with a text from Will in Malvern. He says something like 3 million British jobs rely on our trade with the EU, but as we are their biggest export customer, the EU would not seek to cease trading with us if we left this undemocratic entity tomorrow, contrary to the scaremongering associations of the Lib Dems and Labour. That's Will in Malvern on the text. Mark Lawley on Twitter says on Thursday the biggest party will be the Apathy Party. And Kevin says the EU is at least democratic. This is on Twitter. The World Trade Organisation has a lot of influence over us one way or another and is quite unaccountable.
Thank you very much, Stuart. You've got 5 more minutes. It's 81333, start with the letters HW. Twitter, use the hashtag EuroBBC. Mike Natras from An Independence from Europe. You laughed there when they said the biggest winner will be the Apathy Party.
Well, the Apathy Party wouldn't be top of the ballot paper. It would be under us because we're at the top. OK? Just a thought.
We can do our alphabet, Mike.
That's very good.
We know you start with A. Yes, very clever.
No, we've been mentioning trade and regulation, and somebody mentioned the City of London. Don't forget that in the Parliament we have an 8% shout. That's if everybody votes in the same direction who's a UK MEP, which they don't anyway. So let's take the City of London. Now, the City of London is unique. It generates so much of our GDP. If those guys over there want to regulate it, which is what we're talking about, if they do, then the tail wags the dog. We have to presumably take their almost 92% vote again for regulation of the City of London. We have 8% resistance. That kind of regulation is very destructive for the UK. You were talking about things that it's impinged on. Well, what about the post offices and subsidies to the post offices? They were said to be unfair because subsidy isn't a level playing field. What about the Royal Mail? They said that needed privatising because it was a monopoly. I was there when they were doing the votes. And also railways. We're told that European railways have to be privatised. 10 years ago, that regulation was put in. Obviously, France hasn't complied, and other places we have.
OK, Mike. I want to hear from because we're running out of time.
I'm saying these things do affect the UK, and we are trying to stop it affecting the UK.
OK, we haven't got long left. Got about 5 minutes. Will Duckworth from the Green Party. The question: in or out for the Greens?
We believe in a referendum. We believe in massive change, but you can change things from within much better than holding a gun to people's heads and saying, "Do this now, or we're getting out." But I think we need to stay in, and I'd like to come in on the financial transaction tax or the Robin Hood tax or a gambling tax for bankers, as I like to call it. If we introduce that, which it looks if we may well do, at just 0.05%, that's 50 pence in every £1,000 they gamble with. That would earn the EU £50 billion and would go a long way to actually solving the dreadful poverty we have here. And we've got to get away from government internally and in Europe that is working for big businesses. We need to stop the rich getting richer and the poorer suffering more and more, as they have been doing for years and years. And the EU is the only thing that is strong enough to stand up against these big businesses.
So, Jim Carver from UKIP, that sounds fair. Stop the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer. What's wrong with that?
Well, I'll tell you, the main thing that's wrong with the financial transaction tax is it will actually have the opposite effect. It will drive British financial institutions outside of the European Union. You'll see them moving to Geneva. You'll see them moving to Hong Kong. Yeah. So all that will happen is that not just the British taxpayer, and you could argue the European taxpayer will lose out. We have to be in a situation where we can pass a legislation in our sovereign parliament. If it doesn't suit, the next government can come along and change it. This doesn't apply within the European Union.
OK, thank you very much. BBC Hereford and Worcester, it's a couple of minutes to 12.
BBC Hereford and Worcester. Big European debate.
Well, it's getting late here at BBC Hereford and Worcester's EU Cafe. The morning rush is over. Breakfast very much done. Now they're getting ready for lunch. The baristas wiping down tables and getting ready and sorting out everything for the next bit, putting the chairs away. Thank you very much to everyone around the table who's joined us today. Anthea McIntyre from the Conservatives, also Nina Gill from Labour, Neville Farmer from the Lib Dems, Jim Carver from UKIP, Will Duckworth from the Greens, Nikki Sinclaire from We Demand a Referendum, and Mike Natras. We demand a referendum now. I missed your now off. I do apologise, Nikki. Now. Yes, we've got that. Thank you. And Mike Natras from An Independence from Europe. Thank you very much for all of your comments this morning. A very lively debate, as it was always going to be. Of course, you go to the polls on Thursday. There'll be more between now and then, of course, right here on BBC Hereford and Worcester. So, yeah, we'll bring you all of that. That's pretty much it from us this morning. We will be back tomorrow on the show from 9 o'clock. So thank you very much for all your comments as well. Lots of tweets, lots of emails, lots of texts, and good quality debate as always. If you want to get in touch with me before tomorrow's programme, if there's anything you think we can help you with, get involved with, any problems we can help solve for you, do drop me an email. Probably the best thing between now and tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Email is elliot.webb@bbc.co.uk. On the way next then for you after the news at 12 o'clock, it's Tony McDonald. She'll take you through the rest of the afternoon here at BBC Hereford and Worcester. And then Andrew Easton gets you home from 4 this afternoon with the big news stories of the day.